Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Today I have for you kind of a part 2 of a project I did last week. So last week I made these little storage tray boxes, and there's lots of ways that they can be used and stacked and organized, but I also made this little drawer system that they could be tucked away in. And as you can see here, you can store lots of little bits. Now, I didn't show you how to make that drawer system then, but I had a few requests saying they'd like to see how to do that. So here is the template for how I created that little drawer. I will have that available as a PDF download on my blog, and I will leave links to that in the show notes, as well as links to how to make the trays, because I'm not going to go over that part in this video. So I'm going to try and keep a lot of this video in real time so that you can see the process live. And what you're going to need for this project is a scrap sheet of pattern paper and a 12 by 12 sheet of cardstock and a paper trimmer with a trimmer blade. If you don't have a scoring blade on your trimmer, then a separate scoring tool, a bone folder, a foam mat, or even cardboard or some kind of squishy mat for doing another step of scoring. And then here you can see my trimmer has a cutting blade and a scoring blade. And like I said, if you don't have that on your trimmer, go ahead and use a separate scoring tool. So I'm going to start off first by cutting down this scrap piece of paper into the 3 little shelves that are going to sit inside of this drawer system. And I'm going to cut this paper down, and I'll try and put measurements up on the screen as we go. I'm going to cut this paper down to 4.5 inches wide by, you'll see me cut it down in a moment, by 3.25 inches. So I'm going to end up with 3 of these little shelves. All right, so there's the 3 shelves all done. Now, in my previous drawer system, I did make them all different pattern paper, and you could totally do that. It's just up to you what you want it to look like in the end. So here is my sheet of cardstock, and the very first thing I'm going to do is, if you have a branding strip on your cardstock, go ahead and trim that off and discard it, because we won't be using that part. So your cardstock should be a true 12 by 12 at the beginning of this process. Okay, so here is my template, and in the template I show that we're going to score and then trim the 2 sides of this box, but I'm going to combine that step down into one. So the first thing we're going to do is trim off 1 inch on one side only of this 12 by 12 pattern paper, and that now shorter side, the 11-inch width, is going to be the width of our box and not the height of our box. So there it is. And then the next step we're going to do is go ahead and score the fold line for the sides of our box to fold up. I'm going to take my cutting blade out of my trimmer so I don't accidentally cut instead of score, and I have done that in the past. So if your trimmer blade can pop out as easily as mine, I would go ahead and do that just so you don't make a mistake at this point. And so I'm scoring at 3.25, and then I'm turning the paper around 180 degrees, and I'm scoring at 3.25 on the other side. So these are going to be the sides of our boxes, and I'm going to go ahead and write the word top on here, and this is going to be on the inside of the box. Now, a lot of cardstock will have a smooth side and a textured side, so before you write that word top, go ahead and decide which side you want to be out and which side you want to be in, and write the word top on the inside. So then I rotate the paper 90 degrees and I score, and all of these score lines are marked out on this sheet. So this next score line happens at 3.25 inches, and I've got my template here, so I have a cheat sheet of numbers in front of me. And then you're going to score at 4.25 inches, and then 4.5 inches, and 4.75 inches. And then we're going to skip up another chunk. So you can see we have a 1-inch gap and then 3 closely spaced score lines, and that's going to create tabs to hold the little shelf. Our next score line is 5.75 inches. So you can see here, I'm just trying to show you the 1-inch gap is going to be where each drawer will fit. So after 5 3/4, we have 6 inches. And my trimmer has, most trimmers with a fold-out arm will have a space on them where it's hard to see where that spacing is. So hopefully yours works out okay, because that next score line is 6 1/4 inches. And this is where a separate score tool would come in easier than a trimmer. That score line was 7 1/4 inches. Then we've got 7 1/2 inches, 7 3/4 inches. So we've got 1, 2, 3 of those inch gaps, which is where our drawers are going to be. So we're going to have one final score line here to make our last space for our last drawer, 8 3/4 inches. Okay, so that is all the scoring we need to do for this project. I'm going to move my trimmer out of the way so that we have space for folding. Now we are just going to fold every single score line. I will speed us up through this process. Now those smaller gapped score lines will be a little harder to get them to score. So you can use what you need to do, a bone folder, your fingers, whatever you need to use to help get all those score lines to fold. Now, right now, during this part, you don't need to worry about which way the score lines fold. We'll take care of that in the next step. So just get them all to fold so that they will be easier to manipulate for the next step of this process. All right, so here's everything folded up. And like I said before, this stuff is not folded correctly right now. So orient your paper with the top word facing you at the top of the paper. So we are going to take the center score line of all 3 of those tightly spaced score lines, and we are going to fold that center score line towards you, towards that word that says top, and we're creating those little tabs that the shelf pieces are going to glue down to on the inside of this drawer system. So once you've got those scored inside, give them a pinch and fold them along the upper and lower coordinating score lines there. And sometimes I will fold the whole thing in half so you have a nice tight little flap of paper that's going to stick up. I will sometimes fold it forward and backward, top and bottom, to get those little tabs to be nice and crisp. So as you can see here, now we have these 3 little tabs that are going to be the shelf holders for our drawer system. Turn your paper over and we are going to put glue inside all of these tab scored bits. So I like this particular glue because it is fairly fast drying, and I'm going to go ahead and speed you up through this gluing process. Now I do leave little gaps where the side walls are going to fold, but you don't really have to do that. I was just being a little extra cautious with a future step, but don't worry about it too much. And this is a little bit of a tricky part to this process. So this glue is not going to want to stick down right away, and these little flaps are pretty tight. So I'm going to get those, I'm going to get the paper to fold flat again by getting those tabs kind of accordion folded so that they're flat with the glue inside. And this can be, they're going to want to shift and move on you, so it can be a little bit difficult, fidgety to get this to happen. I try to get one of them at a time to fold for me and then move on to the next one. And once each one has been folded in a little bit, that kind of just makes it a little bit easier as you go. So here we go. I've got everything to be able to fold flat with that glue inside those tabs. And then I'm going to weigh this down. This is my box of pre-made greeting cards. I've got my Misty stamping tool. So I'm just going to put some weight on here. Before I step aside to leave it, I'm going to go ahead and use that bone folder to kind of smush everything down as flat as I can get it. Put that weight on there. And then I'm going to walk away. I'm going to leave this to dry for probably half an hour. And then when I come back, here's what it looks like. Now, I did have some of that little section there kind of pop loose on me, and that's okay. That might happen to you. I'm going to squeeze a little bit extra glue in there, kind of smooth out the glue with my fingernail and my fingers. And then everything else was glued well enough that I can move on to the next step. So when you flip it back face up, you'll have those tabs that will be glued down and nice and tight to create those shelves for you. So I'm going to press them all up towards the top just a little bit, and that will make our next step just a little bit easier. All right, here is another key point to this process. We are going to miter the corners. So where the side walls are scored for the next fold, I'm going to make just a little triangular notch cut right up to that score line on either side of these little shelves. And those notches are going to allow those shelves to fold next to each other to create the inner shelves. So I'm going to do each of those tabbed lines, just a triangle notch centered on that side fold score. Hopefully that all makes sense. So you can see all of those notches. They're going to leave those tabs to kind of act independently, and this is called mitering. Think about a picture frame that has mitered corners. They're at an angle, so that when you put the pieces of the frame together in that corner, they will be able to fit flush together. Okay, so I'm not going to fold the sides yet because we need some more score lines in order to get our sides to fold down. So from that intersection of our side score lines, I'm going to score from that intersection to the corner of our paper. And you can see the score lines fairly well here on the video, and I will speed us through because we need to do every single corner. All right, once those are all scored, I'm going to orient my paper so that the top is back at the top, and then we're going to start pushing those side edges inward. And those score lines are going to create a flap that we're going to glue. We're going to glue the top and the bottom with those flaps, and that is going to create the final structure of our box. So here you can see I've folded one flap on the top and then the second flap on the top. You'll see how they will overlap inside. Now, I made an error in the video when I was gluing these together, so I'm going to skip that part. I did glue it, and I did let it sit for just a minute with a stamping block in there as a little bit of a weight. So here's the bottom of the box, and sometimes these little corners won't want to cooperate with you, so just kind of pinch them and push them with your fingernail until they fold in there nice and crisp and flush. So here is the correct way to glue these. I put on the inner triangle that's closest to the back side of that piece of paper, I glued that inner triangle. And then on the outside of this box, I'm going to glue the outer triangle. And then you can fold it in, and all that glue will be in the appropriate spots so nothing oozes out and leaks out on you, and the box will be secured top and bottom with all of that glue in the correct spot. All right, and that glues the bottom of the box. Now I will set my stamping block inside of there. You can see it there. Leave it down for just a few minutes before we move on to the next step. I did kind of wiggle it around in there and give it a push down to help everything adhere nice and well. And we are back with that box in it. I just let it sit for a few minutes. I didn't leave it for a whole half an hour like I did with the tabs because this part has a lot more surface area, so it's not as finicky with gluing down. Now you can see how that box bows naturally. So these shelves are going to do a couple of jobs. They're going to help keep our little drawers from slipping and sliding on those tabs. And they're also going to pull the sides of that box in. So these drawers add some structure to this project. So I'm going to glue along one long edge and the two short edges, and I'm going to slide that shelf onto that bottommost tab, and then I'm going to stick my fingers in there and just kind of press that shelf down. And this is where you want to use not too much glue, because the more glue you have, the longer it will take to dry, and the slipperier that shelf will be as you're trying to manipulate this in here. Now I am using my other hand to kind of squeeze the edges of the box inward so that shelf will sit flush up against the edge of the box. And then I will give it a final pinch towards those tabs, front and back, and I will rub my finger one more time along all around the edge of those tabs. And really that should do it, and then you can move on to the other shelves. And for this box, I made sure all the shelves were lined up with the pattern papers matching. But you can, if you're using different pattern papers, or if you don't care, you can just line them up however you want. And then I will finish off the third shelf in this box, giving it pinches on those tabs and then running my finger along the front, back, and sides of those tabs, so that shelf will hold the structure of our drawer system together. And that is the bulk of this project. Now, here are the drawers that I created in the previous video, so go ahead, if you haven't seen that, go watch that. In the previous video, I created those drawers 1 inch deep, but for this project, I created these drawers 3/4 of an inch deep. So keep that in mind if you haven't seen that previous video, that these will fit a little bit better if you make that depth a little bit smaller. So I am just sliding all these drawers in here. I made a kind of a pretty rainbow-ish set of drawers. Now you can see these drawers stick out a little bit from the base of this box because I made those drawers with a full sheet of 6x6 pattern paper. If you want them to fit more flush, you can do a little bit of math. When you go back and watch that drawer video, do a little bit of math and you can get them to fit completely inside of here. But I kind of like them sticking out because that gives me a little bit of view of what's inside these little drawers. I will give you a couple more tips on using these little drawers. You can stack them up. I probably wouldn't go more than 3 tall. I only have mine stacked up 2 high, and you can see this one has different colors of pattern papers in there, and that drawer I created just slightly smaller. So you can make smaller and larger drawers, stack them up. You can stack them side by side. And these are great little shelves for keeping small embellishments all organized and right close by you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments on this video, if something wasn't clear, please do drop me a note. I will get back to you. I have 2 more videos for you this week on Wednesday and Friday, so do come back and join me then. I'll see you next time.